Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me back again. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, awesome. All right, so for those of us who have lost loved ones, the holidays can be really, really hard. Something as small as a scent, a song, or even making plans, the sight of a decoration can bring a wave of unwanted grief. It can be isolating and we can feel as if no one understands us. And it's hard because we're a grief illiterate society. We don't talk about grief in our society at all. And we're also really not allowed to grieve in our society. We're supposed to get over the loss of a loved one quickly and move on. But it wasn't always that way. So before the 20th century, most people died at home around the comfort of their loved ones. Death was a normal part of life. Tending to the dead took place in our homes, and the deceased were laid out in the front rooms for people to come say their goodbyes and their condolences. As end-of-life interventions became more aggressive within the medical system, people ended up in hospitals, living out the end of their days, the last days of their lives, in a sterile environment. So death was taken out of the home and out of our lives, and we were no longer allowed to grieve. Grief isn't something that's experienced for a short amount of time. It's long, it can be hard, and we don't wake up a month later and suddenly it's gone. It just simply takes time, and we don't get over it one day. It's about moving through it and slowly moving through it in our own time and our own space. Our feelings are valid, but we don't feel validated. Not in this society, unfortunately. It does shift with time, but it never quite goes away. So years ago, there was a Reddit post somebody did. They'd lost a loved one, and one of the responders had this great analogy for grief that I want to share. So he said it's like being in the middle of the ocean. So you're out in the middle of the ocean, it's dark, it's cold, and there are 100-foot waves coming down on top of you, and you feel like you're not going to make it. After a while, those waves lessen. Maybe they're 80-foot waves. You're still deep in the dark. You still aren't sure how you're even alive at this point. You're not sure that you're going to make it still. The waves drop down. Now they're 60, 50 feet. You're still drowning. You still don't know how you're making it. And eventually, over time, the waves do lessen their fury until one day you feel like maybe you will survive. And I do want to do a side note. Grief, when we think about grief, we often think about grief in conjunction with losing a loved one, but it's not always about losing a loved one. It permeates a lot of areas of our lives that we don't always think about. So for example, if somebody loses a job, unexpectedly they're grieving, but sometimes we choose to leave our job, and then we miss our family and friends that we built at that company. Sometimes grief could be moving from one city to the next. Now we've lost our base community, one state to another, or one country to another, where we've lost all of our cultural norms. And if we look at something as simple as caregiving, caregivers are often overlooked. So let's say somebody has dementia or Alzheimer's. We look at the person, we say, okay, the person's still alive. Yeah, they're alive, but they don't know who we are sometimes from one day to the next. All the plans that we made in the future, they're now gone. The conversations aren't there. So grief, loss. So I should say, so grief is about the loss of something. So it's always the ending of something. We're always losing something. So it's not always that we lost somebody, it's something that we've lost. Now when we're grieving, it feels like no one understands us. It feels like no one sees us. We become alone, we become isolated. And oftentimes when we're grieving, our family and friends the people who used to get us, don't get us anymore. And then we become even more isolated. And then they start to isolate us. And then after a while, the questions come, why haven't you moved on? What's wrong with you? And then we start to feel judged. We're already judging ourselves for our grief, because that's kind of the way society works, I hate to say. But then we feel judged from others, and then we don't feel like we can express our feelings in a safe way, and now we isolate even more. The pain is intense. The pain feels like it will never, ever go away. And we forget that no feelings are final. We forget that no feelings are final. Feelings come and go. But it feels like as if we start crying, we're afraid that we're never going to stop crying. I can assure you that nobody's ever started crying and stopped crying. But it doesn't feel like it. It feels like it will never end. We forget that no feelings are final. We forget that joy and happiness and life are still possible. It's as if we're afraid to feel good because we're afraid we aren't honoring our loved ones anymore. Sometimes it feels disloyal to let go of their suffering and start living again. But the irony is more than likely they would want you to be happy and experience joy and live again. So whether you're going through grief or you know somebody else who is, I'm going to give you 4 ways to help move through grief. Now, this is not an exhaustive list at all. It's a really short list. We could talk about grief for hours, but just 4 ways to help you move through grief. So the first thing is to acknowledge. So I've lost something. Oftentimes when that big, huge wave of grief comes on, it feels like it's unreal and we push it away. So the first step is just acknowledge, simply pause and know that it's normal. And even if you feel alone, you aren't alone. There are many others out there. Be gentle with yourself. Avoid judgment. Your feelings are valid. Give yourself that time and space to grieve. And the old, I have to be strong for my family and friends, it doesn't work. Eventually you'll break down. So the second way is to express it. So express it. So one of the ways we can express it is to talk about it. So therapy, find a grief support group, and also know that as we talk about grief, some people will be able to sit with you and hear and listen, and some people will understand, and some people won't. And the people who don't understand, usually you get and they don't say anything. And I just want to let you know that even if you get it doesn't mean they don't care. It means they don't know what to say or what to do. Okay? Other ways to express it. If you like walking, if you like hiking, writing, therapy. If you haven't heard of Paul Denniston, I'd like to introduce you to Paul Denniston. I call him the grief yoga guy. He's amazing. His website is griefyoga.com, pretty simple, griefyoga.com. And we're not talking yoga like, arm out, leg and arm out to here and you pull a muscle. I've done that before. It's really simple, it's really easy. Most of his things you can do while sitting in the chair. And I want to share that I've done some of his webinars online, and every time I go in to do them, I think, why am I doing this? I don't need this. And afterwards, I always feel so much better afterwards. So he's great. So express it. And the next way is honor. How do we honor? How do you honor this person? How can I honor this person? So I had a client who she would write love letters to her deceased husband as if he was outside of the country. So you can write a poem. How else can you honor this person? Play their favorite music, maybe write to them in a journal. You could go bigger than that. A woman who lost her daughter started a grief support group. There was a husband and son, they'd go walking their favorite trail they'd walk on, and when he lost his son, he had a bench built and put the bench on the trail in honor of his son. Now, I can only imagine the red tape behind that. You don't have to go that big. It could be smaller, singing your heart out to your loved one's favorite song while you're driving down the road. So how do you honor the person? And then the last step is reconnect. How do you reconnect? How do you reintegrate in your world that works for you while acknowledging it will be different? Because it's always different. So how do we reconnect? So oftentimes we become so isolated because we just don't have the capacity to think or act or move. And so we get the phone calls, but we're not answering the phone. And what happens when you call somebody 3 or 4 or 5 times and they don't answer? Yes, stop calling, right? So sometimes we even have to make that first step. So how do you reconnect into the world? So those are just 4 ways. It's not an exhaustive list, just to give you some ideas, and whether you're in the middle of your grief or you know somebody who is, some ways you can help them. I'd also like to introduce you to David Kessler. If you haven't heard of David Kessler, he is the grief guy in our country. His website is grief.com. Pretty easy, grief.com. He's written many books on grief, and he runs online grief programs. They're great. He is so good. And there is a small monthly fee for his grief programs, but even if you know somebody who's grieving, his website is great for support. So I definitely recommend David Kessler. I myself, I have a single session process I guide my clients through to help lessen their grief. I can't make it go away. I wish I could, but it brings it down a lot. Some of my clients, when I go to speak to their loved ones who are on the other side, I'm not psychic, they do that, I just facilitate that. And then also another idea is to find a local grief support group. There are many grief support groups. Just Google it in your area and I'm sure you'll find one or two. So if you or somebody else is grieving, I give you permission to grieve. Your feelings are valid, absolutely. It's a normal part of the rhythm of life. Definitely find support if you need it. And if nothing else, take a walk. Get out and take a walk and breathe fresh air. They've done so many studies on people who are deep in depression. The last thing they want to do is get up and walk. But the one thing they found is when they get up and they walk, it is the best thing. It lifts depression. So anyways, so I hope that helps you or gives you a better understanding of somebody in your world who may be in grief. Thank you so much for having me back again. I appreciate it.